think now we have linked through to Jean-David Malo, Director of the European Innovation Council. Welcome. Let's see if we can hear you.
Yes, good morning, Johan.
Excellent.
Pleasure. You hear me?
We can hear you. The floor is yours.
Many thanks, Johan. I'm really delighted to be with you this morning for this important event, which is a Green Impact Week. So as you said, my name is Jean-David Malo. I'm the director of the European Innovation Council and Small and Medium Enterprise Executive Agency, which has been just created 2 months ago on the 1st of April as a result of the launch of the new programs at the EU level for the period 2021-2027, and which has the particularity, in fact, to regroup all the programs that are managed at EU level that are dealing with innovators in a nutshell, mainly the European Innovation Council, on which I will tell you a few words in a minute, but also all the programs that are relating to innovation ecosystem, be it in the context of the framework program for research and innovation, Horizon Europe, or be it at the level of structural funds, with a program which is managed at EU level, which is called the Interregional Innovation Investments Program, but also all the SME-related activities that are part of the Single Market Program. So an agency which has really the purpose to be at the service of innovators with the clear objective to provide relevant support to promising innovators in Europe in the next 7 years. So maybe in the context of your week, a few words on what is certainly the most important novelty in the programs proposed at EU level by the Commission. I mean, when I say by the Commission acting on behalf of the Council, so the Member States, but also the representative of our citizens, the European Parliament, this program being the European Innovation Council. And if we can move quickly to the next slide, there is a rationale for the launch of this very important program, which has its foundation on the fact that we remain in Europe very, very good regarding the generation of knowledge, and in particular research-related knowledge or technology-oriented knowledge, as you can see it in a number of facts, like, for example, the number of Nobel Prizes that are European, the number of universities that are able to attract the best talent in the world, the number of publications in top journals that are made by Europeans. But we have also a number of remaining weaknesses that are mainly in 2 areas. Our difficulty to ensure transition of this knowledge from lab to enterprise, where a lot was done regarding technology transfer, but where we remain with a real value of death here in comparison to our main competitors. And the second area, second value of death, if you want to use this terminology, is our relatively weak capacity to provide relevant scaling up means for our high-risk innovators, and in particular for our promising deep tech startups in comparison, for example, to the US, or now more and more also in comparison to Asia. So we have these weaknesses that are here, that are on top of a weakness that remains, which is relating to the fragmentation of our innovation ecosystem. But beyond this fragmentation, because you could tell me that this fragmentation also exists in the US, and this is true, this relative unconnectedness that you may have between our various innovation hubs and our relevant difficulty to tackle a number of challenges that we have, which are relating to our identification of the real talents that we have in our countries, as well as our difficulty to tackle remaining innovation divides or innovation gaps that exist between our various countries and regions. So this is the rationale, in fact, of the idea of setting up the European Innovation Council. And this is even more important, if we can move to the next slide, please, is even more important because of the particularity, in fact, of our venture capital market in Europe, which remains relatively lagging behind our main competitors, and you can see it here on this slide in comparison with the US. If you take, for example, the area of healthcare, it's even worse. And this is a real question at the moment where, if we move to the next slide, it's very important that we are taking a risk in an area which will lead, in fact, the market, which will have an impact on our society in the coming years. I mean, by definition, a disruptive technology is something that you can only identify when it took place. But if you want to be in the driving seat, I mean, you have to take risk at the very start. And what happened in the past when car industry or electricity was introduced and has changed our society, we were among those who take this kind of risk. It was less true in the previous revolutions that were mainly led by social media, by the Internet of Things, by digital platforms, where clearly the US has won this battle. But we are now in a moment where deep tech technology is clearly preparing a huge revolution in a number of markets. You can feel it with the roles that artificial intelligence will very likely play. You can feel it with quantum technology, but in an area which is absolutely essential in relation to the Green Deal that is at the top of our policy priority in Europe. We see also that the technology relating to new batteries, just to take this example, or the introduction of hydrogen will have a key impact, and we have to invest in those technologies. We have to invest in the companies that will participate, in fact, to this transition, to this revolution, which is again a political priority. If we want to be among the leaders, if we want also as a direct consequence to maintain also our own model of society, our own vision, which is not the same as the ones that you can find in the US or in China, just to take these two examples. So this was the rationale of the necessity to launch the European Innovation Council, and this led, in fact, to a pilot phase. And we can maybe move to the next slide, where indeed we have tried to identify, to test, a number of new avenues. And those new avenues were very simple, in fact, but nevertheless very new in their content and in their formats. The main novelties that we have introduced and that we intend to amplify right now is the possibility to provide the necessary means to our promising startup and SMEs in a bottom-up way, but also in a top-down way, in a challenged way, including, in particular, in the Green Deal area. And what does it mean? It means that what we did in the past, which was only to provide grant support to this promising startup and SMEs, is now also complemented for the ones that are the most promising, for the ones that can play a key role in the main domain where we see that the technology could have an impact on the market or could contribute to the delivery of our policy objective, is complemented with direct investment made by the Commission via a fund which has been created for this purpose, which is the EIC fund, where our objective is certainly now to crowding out private investors, but to crowding in private investors, where we will play a catalytic effect, where we are playing with a patient capital objective in order to give a chance to this technology, to these companies, to indeed scale up as quickly as possible. So we have tested this approach in the last 2 years, and we have identified 159 companies which are receiving blended finance, so a combination of grants and equity funding for an equity support that will reach a bit less than 700 million euro, which will make, in fact, this fund one of the most important early stage funds in terms of deep tech technology, including in the Green Deal area. The second objective was also, of course, to fit with the policy objectives, and including in this period of piloting the EIC, we launched some top-down exercise. One, obviously, of course, during last year in the context of the COVID, but also another one, which was the first ever Green Deal call of the European Commission in the context of the EIC accelerator, and where we have identified there also a number of companies that will contribute to this transition. Our objective with the EIC is clearly to become a hallmark of excellence in terms of innovation, like the European Research Council is considered as a hallmark of excellence in terms of science or research. With the new program, on which I will say a few words in a minute, I mean, we have clearly this ambition to go even faster, quicker, and with more impact than what we have tested during the pilot. For the pilot, I will not insist on this, but we can move maybe to the next slide there also, just to tell you that Denmark, in fact, was one of the most successful country in terms of participation, certainly the most successful one per capita in the period 2014-2020, because we have built, of course, our new program on previous program, namely the SME instrument as far as the accelerator is concerned. If you look at the following slides, that of course will be circulated to your attention, you will see that Denmark has largely contributed and benefited from this new approach. In particular, 20 Danish startups and SMEs were selected in the pilot, with 7 of them benefiting from the blended finance. And if we move to the next slide, I just would like to insist on one on which we have already announced the investments on the 24th of February, which is Nil Technology, in which the Commission, on top of a budget of 2.3 million euro of grant, will invest up to 15 million euro of equity investment, with the first disbursement of the equity that has already taken place. I will not go into the details of all the Denmark participation, but all of this will be at your disposal. So I propose that we move to the next slide again, just to tell you a bit more about the future. I mean, the future, which is now the present. Of the European Innovation Council. So the European Innovation Council is, as you know, part of Horizon Europe, with a very substantial budget of more than 10 billion euro, something which is more by 0.1 billion, but in the context of the cut that took place in the negotiation of the MFF, this is also a sign, a bit more than the initial proposal of the Commission, which was 10 billion euro. And the rationale for it is that by definition, this program will contribute to the recovery effort in the context of the post-pandemic or during pandemic issue. The main characteristic of the EIC can be summarized as follows if we move to the next slide. It has a specific governance with a board and a president, which are there to set strategic advice for the implementation. It is implemented by a very agile executive agency that I have the chance to lead, but also complemented by an EIC fund, which will manage the equity investment, and where we are working directly with other investors in the 159 pilot case companies that we have selected. We have already, at the level of the board, validated more than 115 investments, and we intend to finalize our decision of investment by the end of this month of June in order to be fully operational for the new companies that will be selected in the course of the running call for the EIC Accelerator, which is coming to an end in terms of submission by the middle of June. And this is already at stake. Now, if we move about the main characteristic of the EIC, just maybe to recall you some important dimension. First, the objective is to cover the whole journey from the generation of an idea, a radical new idea in terms of technology, up to the scaling up of a company, including the IPO of the company. So it's a one-stop shop approach, which has been designed and which is now implemented, with a clear focus on game-changing breakthrough technology, game-changing innovation, and where, by definition, it was important to change the way we are monitoring, we are selecting our project. This has called for the employment of new staff within the Commission, and in particular for program managers that are hired by the Commission in order to proactively manage this project, to steer a portfolio of projects in order to create connection among them, and to help the Commission also to develop visions on the basis of their background, of their connection, of their network, in order to have a really flexible approach in terms of support. So this is inspired by what you can find in the US. So everybody is quoting DARPA. Personally, I prefer the approach of ARPA-E, because in DARPA, of course, you have already a potential client behind, while in ARPA-E, of course, you have to develop the client dimension. But and the ARPA-E is in the context of this event even more relevant in order to see how we can create this connection with actors that will contribute to the Green Deal transition. Our objective is clearly to become the unicorn factory, as my Director General Jean-Éric Paquet is saying very, very oftenly, with an approach which is clearly to have a catalytic effect for additional investment coming from promotional institutions or from the private investors' side, while on the same time to continue to invest where we are very strong, which is the upstream dimension of the EIC, the so-called Pathfinder, where we remained very strong and where we are leaders in a number of domains in terms of generation of knowledge and identification of emerging technologies. But where we have, of course, to ensure something even more important is the connection with the rest of the ecosystem. Reason why is that we have created the EIC forums that will be officially launched very soon, and where we would like to create partnership with a number of key actors. Of course, we have started with the ones that are working directly with us because are part of the activities of the Commission, such as the EIT, and we have launched a number of partnerships with some of the EIT kicks, and we will continue to develop them with the European Research Council, in particular with the beneficiaries that are emerging from some proof of concept project in order to help them to join the transfer of technology dimension or to bring the necessary means to startups that are emerging from this project in the context of the EIC accelerator. But on top of this, we would like, of course, to create this type of partnership, and we are already finalizing a number of partnership in this context with national actors, of course, some innovation agencies, but also other actors like some investors that would like to participate to this joint ambition. In a nutshell, and I propose that we move to the next slide, what we are proposing, in fact, is this whole journey from the emergence of the ID to the scale-up of companies. And this starts, of course, with the very early stage where we will provide fit for purpose support, which will take the form of grants, of course, for early stage research on breakthrough technologies via the program called the Pathfinder. On the ultimate opposite of the journey, with the accelerator, as I told you, we are proposing the possibility of a grant only when the company is not yet ready for investments, blended finance when the company is more investment ready, not necessarily fully investment ready, but with already a number of characteristics of investment readiness, with the possibility of a combination of 2.5 million euro of grant on our side and a maximum investment component of up to 15 million euro. On top, of course, of any other investments that may come from promotional institutions and private investors. And in the middle of this, because the two of them are not necessarily connected immediately, we have introduced transition schemes in order to provide the necessary support for maturing technology and for accessing business and market readiness with grant support up to 2.5 million euro. These are the main type of schemes that are proposed under the EIC. The three main schemes have already launched, in fact, their first calls, because the EIC and the ERC are the two programs which have already adopted their work program under Horizon Europe and have launched their calls because of the necessity to provide immediate support to our main target group, in particular to startup and SMEs. But on top of these main schemes, it's important to have in mind that even if money is absolutely necessary, the accompanying measures in order to create the most flourishing and the most friendly innovation ecosystem are even more important. This is why we are providing what we are calling business acceleration services. We are providing our beneficiaries with coaches, with mentors, but even more than this, we are creating the links with important corporate that are leading in a number of markets in order to create win-win situation, win for the corporates that are developing their own strategy, but win also for the companies that therefore could have access to new clients with this corporate. We are providing access to investors for follow-on round of fundings. We are providing access to public procurers or private procurers because for a company which is very important beyond funding is indeed to develop clients and to have validation of their technology with this kind of business activities. So all these kind of support are available and are at your disposal. In the area of the Green Deal, of course, our companies in Europe, but also in the future in the associated countries that will be associated to Horizon Europe, that for the time being we don't know because the association agreement negotiations are running. These companies will have the possibility already to participate, in fact, to all these calls, be it in bottom-up, because in bottom-up call, in open call, by definition, any areas except the ones that are forbidden on genomics manipulation or on a purely military purpose can participate and come with an ID, but also in down calls, in some challenges calls that we have launched. And if you look at our work program 2021, you will see that in both the Pathfinder, but also the Accelerator, we have reserved a certain share of our budget for Green Deal related calls, where I'm sure that a number of people that are participating to your event will be very pleased to participate. So maybe just to conclude, because I know that we have a limited time frame, if we can move to not the next slide, but the next one. Stop here. You have here, in fact, all the relevant information regarding the calls that we have launched for the various topics that I just mentioned, and do not hesitate to be in touch with us in order to know more about what is offered. And I will stop here due to the time schedule. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean-David Malo. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent. We are, as you said, running out of time here, but I have two quick questions for you. I'm going to skip the one on why it's difficult to commercialize research, because we're going to have a bit more to talk about that this afternoon. But I would like to hear more about that big difference in investment between the EU and the US. I used to work for Eurostat, actually, and sometimes it's a matter of definitions or sources come from elsewhere. We could say maybe it's public funding or family offices. Or is it because the ecosystems are fragmented? Is it because the ecosystem in the US is more coherent and we have these different competing ecosystems among the member states that make it more difficult for the VCs to find a relevant investment opportunity?
You have several reasons, in fact, and I would not say it's your option one or option two. It's a bit of a mix of both in reality. First of all, one of the main difference that you have in comparison to the US is the one that I have slightly touched regarding the access to funding via the venture capital industry. The size of the venture capital industry in the US or in Europe is really different. But more in details, what you can see is that the size of each VC fund, in average, is totally different. The VC fund, in average, in the US are 5-6 times bigger, in average, than in Europe. And by definition, as a direct consequence, I mean, the granularity of the portfolio is different, and therefore the capacity to take risk for this VC fund is not the same. I mean, if you can take 5%, let's say, of very high risk in a VC fund with a fund which is 5 or 6 times bigger, the impact is not the same. You are by definition able to invest in more companies. Second reason is that, and you touch it a little bit, it's not only the question of the fragmentation of the ecosystem, which is at stake here, because to a certain extent you have a fragmentation of the ecosystem also in the US, but you have a better connectedness between the innovation hub in the various regions in the US in comparison to Europe. And for example, it's more difficult for a Danish company, despite the fact that you have a very good innovation environment in Denmark, it's more difficult for a Danish company to find the VCs that maybe will be established in France or in Spain than for somebody from the Arkansas to be in touch with somebody in Boston or in Raleigh. So this is a second dimension. A third dimension, of course, is the legal framework in which you are working. I mean, in the US, you have something by definition which is more fluid, despite the fact that there also you have a number of state law that exist, but you nevertheless have an overarching legal framework that exists at the level of the country, where in Europe, it's just a fact, we remain with 27 different countries. A fourth reason on which I'd like also to insist is that we have a different structure of origin of the funds in the investments. At the very beginning of the VC market in the US, you had something which was a bit similar to what you have in Europe today. I mean, with a very significant role played by public actors, in particular in the early stage. But it's not the case anymore in the US. I mean, the transition to the private sector is done, and you can see that pension funds, insurances, and so on are playing a key role, which is less the case in our countries, despite the fact that the availability of liquidity is more or less the same. What is different is the attractiveness of this segment of investments. In a nutshell, but we could discuss this for hours.
Yes, we could, and unfortunately we can't. I've actually been politely asked to skip my second question because we are running out of time. It would have been around the female founders and the fact that we simply not see enough funding going to the female founders, although all studies show that if you invest in female founders, you are better off with your investment. But thank you very much.
Exactly.
I will catch up with you tomorrow or later today.
With pleasure.
This is Jean-David Malo, European Innovation Council.